And now, welcome former cyclist, founder and managing partner of Next Ventures, Lance Armstrong, in a candid conversation with health tech reporter at Axios, Aaron Broadwin.
Ooh, it's a bouncy couch. Hi, everybody. How are we doing? Okay, I didn't hear anyone, but I hope that means we're doing well.
It's been a long day, I think, right?
And a long one tomorrow. So, Lance, I feel like you are a little bit of a poster child for the key word in this panel, which is adversity. You were a triathlete at 15. You got a cancer diagnosis at 25. You raised $500 million for cancer research. You've also had the whole world cheering for you. You've had the whole world rooting against you. What has that journey taught you about how to deal with adversity, to not only survive, but also, thrive when things hit the fan?
That's a mouthful, and it's a very loaded question. And I have led a complicated life. I'm a complicated person. But through it all, and a lot of these things, and we missed steps along the way. I was born in Dallas, Texas, to a 17-year-old girl, never met my father. And so that was obviously what happened first. All the other stuff happened after that. All of these were sort of obviously part of the process, but they were learnings along the way that I think enabled me and equipped me to handle the worst one. What happened, and for those who followed the story, and this sort of surprises people, this coming January will be the 10-year anniversary of the interview with Oprah. And when people hear that, they think, oh my God, that was 10 years ago, and it was. 10 years is a long time. But all of these things that have happened in my life really prepared me to sort of manage and try to overcome literally going from hero to zero overnight. When I stepped off of her couch, it was over. And I didn't know that I would have an opportunity to be in this room with you all or be in the business that we're in. But I knew a couple things. Okay, I have 5 children. I knew that I was going to embrace my children. I knew that I was going to embrace my health, because so many people in this situation or a similar situation just lose it. I knew I didn't want to do that. And so I leaned into my family, I leaned into my own health and well-being, and just crossed my fingers that hopefully one day I'd have a chance. And in some form or fashion, it seems to have happened.
That's a great answer. So I know now you're a VC. You have a firm, Next Ventures. Not everyone, becomes a VC overnight, and I'm sure you didn't. But I remember you telling me a while ago that there was a point, you had a podcast, and there was a point at which you started getting a lot of deal flow, like through your podcast. So how did that influence Next Ventures and your idea to start a fund? Tell us more about that.
So it's true. A kid who has been an endurance athlete his whole life and never went to college and has lived a very complicated life normally doesn't turn to venture. But as the story has played out, there has been, like most professional athletes, you come into some money, and I was able to invest this money with some really, really smart people and really admire what the Chris Sakas of the world were doing and the Brad Silverbergs of the world were doing. And those introductions and those associations really, frankly, changed the course of our life. Without those, I don't think we would have necessarily landed on our feet. So I really looked up to these guys. And of course, Saka, most people know these stories in the investing world, but Saka was the Uber success and Silverberg was the DocuSign success. So I really looked up to them, and as the world allowed me to come back in, even just a little bit, right? And keep in mind, we live, just as healthcare is rapidly changing and all of these spaces are rapidly changing, we also live in a time where creating content has rapidly changed. You know this, you're in this business. Anybody in the world can create content. If if my downfall happened 20 years ago, and you couldn't buy mics and you couldn't upload a show to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube or whatever, I'm toast. Nobody's calling again. But we're living in a day and age when anybody can create content, and so it empowered me to go out there and do it. So I started my show, which was just a general interview-style show, interviewing interesting people, and then I built a second show, which was a cycling show, which was a show that I swore to God I would never do. I said, I'm never talking about cycling again.
Why?
We don't have long enough to get into why. I mean, listen, the reality, I'm going to answer it, because I think the reality, we're not here just focusing on physical health. We're also focusing on mental health. The reality is, despite the whole story and despite all of my mistakes, and this is not a cry for sympathy, but the fallout was traumatic. You would be crazy, or I would be crazy to think that I don't have some sort of PTSD from it. You can't go hero to zero overnight and not suffer, and I suffered. And so there was this block around, why not? I mean, why? I was like, no, I can't go back there. I can't touch it. And I dipped a toe and ended up doing it, and the show became by far the biggest show we have. But and when I say big, I mean our Tour de France show, reminder, the tour is 3 weeks in July. Over the course of 3 weeks, about 8 million downloads. So with that kind of audience, people wanted access to the audience. They wanted, whether it's, could they advertise, or would we invest, or could I test their gear, or, it started very simply. And so I saw it. It's not I'm not the first person to think that potentially there's a flywheel there. So if you have you have the audience, you have deal flow, you have capital, and then if you can reintegrate that all back authentically back into the shows and the content, it could ignite. And so that was early days. That was the origin of Next Ventures. Before there was a team, before we had ever made an investment, but that was the genesis.
So I do feel a little like there's something in the water with regards to athletes getting into venture. I mean, Serena Williams, Kevin Durant. As you said, you don't have a traditional business background. What do you think athlete like yourself brings to the table? What's your edge?
Well, I think it's no secret, and you're exactly right. But it's no secret that successful entrepreneurs or founders want to be around success, great success. So a person like Serena or KD, the name of the game is deal flow, right? So if you're of a high profile nature, you are going to naturally get deal flow. Now, Serena is sort of the queen. I mean, when I think about this space and other athletes, and she's the yellow jersey, right? I mean, she's the best of the best, and we've been fortunate enough to do stuff with her and her team. And the thing I'll say about Serena, because I can't really speak to the KD example or some of the other guys, but Serena Williams, it's called Serena Ventures. It doesn't stop there. And she's become a really, really dear friend. She busts her ass on that fund. Like, she is on calls. She is engaged. I mean, if Serena Ventures is making an investment, it's because Serena Williams wants to. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah. So given that you don't have that traditional business background, I mean, who are your trusted advisors? Who do you turn to when you want advice about whether to invest or not invest? I mean, we're both wearing Oura rings. I know you're invested in Oura Ring, but you're also invested in companies like SteadyMD, for example. I mean, who do you talk to?
It's very simple. We are a 4-person team. It's not even close to how far the distance is between third and fourth in terms of intelligence and intellect and experience. I'm number 4. I mean, I'm surrounded by, and 2 of my teammates are here, Julian Eisen and Jordan Pascasio. Our other partner, Mel Strong, who many of you guys probably have known because she's a force of nature. She couldn't make it. And I tell people, and it sounds a little like BS, but I've been on a lot of great teams, and I've been on a lot of winning teams. This is by far the best team I've ever been on. And so, to your point, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. and I play to my strengths, and I think the whole team does, but I really defer to them and trust them. And I wouldn't be here without them.
Yeah. How invested is your first fund?
We are about, you mean in total? We're about 60% deployed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you have any sense of time for second fund?
In the future.
Good answer.
Yeah. No, I think we have to be a little careful about that. But look, we have enjoyed. I mean, Aura. You briefly mentioned Aura. We were very fortunate to be in Aura at a very, very early stage and continue with follow-ons. SteadyMD, another great example. Outside Inc., another great example. Sold 2 of the companies. We sold PowerDot to Therabody, and we sold Hammerhead to SRAM, the second biggest component maker in the world. So we've avoided the big misses, and we have some big winners. So yes, I mean we will eventually do that.
Got it. So I feel like, there's a lot of stars in health tech in terms of companies, but you also have to watch out for the companies that are a little bit of smoke and mirrors, and it's really hard to tell which are which, especially, when you've got glamorous booths and sparkles and lights and all those sorts of things. And I wonder, how do you think about making sure that you're placing the right bets, but you're also not investing or supporting, cultures of deception or smoke and mirrors, as I said earlier. Like, how do you think about that stuff?
I would tell you that not just myself, but I think the whole team. If we don't know the answer, we'll go get the answer. We're not going to guess. I rely heavily on my network, and I've been around not just sports, but I've been around health and healthcare for more than half my life. So, for example, we had some questions just in and around healthcare the other day, and I said with the team, and not just about healthcare, but where healthcare and politics sort of intersect. And I said, well, why don't we get Sanjay Gupta on the line? And so, because Sanjay, everybody here knows him as America's doctor and a CNN correspondent, but most don't know that Sanjay actually comes from a political background. He was in the Clinton administration. Barack Obama asked him to be the Surgeon General. So he, in my simple mind, if I think about medicine and politics and healthcare and politics, he's the guy I think about. So, and he's been a dear friend of mine for 20 years. So that kind of, I would rely, you can't burden a guy like that with too much, but if you have specific questions and you can get in and get out, and he's willing to do it, which he was, then that's how we can get as smart as we can, as fast as we can.
Do you text him? Do you call him? Do you have him on speed dial?
I don't know about speed dial, but I do. We are on a text. I don't know what you call it, like text basis. Yeah.
Great. Cool. What would you say is the most misunderstood thing about you?
Oh boy, I've had a lot of questions. That's the most misunderstood thing about me. I think again, the story is so complicated. I think and so much has come out about my life and my life story, and there are certain things that are just off, and they're not accurate. But I don't, frankly, at this point, I don't spend any time thinking about that. I'm completely liberated. I've been given a chance to play offense again, and I'm super grateful for that. And that might be the one thing that could be misunderstood, is that if this guy were to get a chance again, would he be grateful? Could he control that competitive desire or whatever it is in the past? But I got to tell you, I mean, I don't, and I also know that I'm not for everybody, right? This is a 50-50 game.
Or any of us.
Right, but it's a 50-50 game for me for the rest of my life, and that is okay. I'm totally cool with that. And if I don't know which side of the 50 you're on, if you're on the team, great. If you're not, I understand. I really do.
So I mentioned earlier that you raised $500 million for cancer research, which every time I say that out loud, I'm like, how in the world? What kind of lessons did that teach you about venture? I mean, what kinds of lessons like that? That was your first kind of fundraising experience, I imagine. What kinds of lessons from that do you bring into Next Ventures?
If I would have, because I have no problem now asking for money. Like if I'm meeting with, let's just imagine we're going to raise another fund, and I'm meeting with somebody. If I had the same fearlessness now around asking for money back then, we'd have raised $1 billion. I promise you, I would have asked every single person that got in my face. But I always went in. Now, keep in mind, of $500 million, more than 80 million of it was through the yellow wristband. So, I mean, crazy initiative that absolutely lit the world on fire. But yes, if I had the same approach to literally asking for money now versus back then, I mean, we would have, it would have been a lot more.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Like, what would you have done differently in terms of asking people?
I was just always nervous. I mean, going back to Sanjay, the team at Livestrong wanted Sanjay to join the board, so we went out to dinner. I was afraid to ask him to join the board. I mean, he's a perfect guy for the board. I just couldn't make the leap, and you know, and look, and I think that is really the silver line. Whether you're asking, it sounds bad to say asking for money, or whether you're asking for anything from somebody. At this point, I kind of have it's not an I don't care perspective, but it's really a fearless perspective. Not careless, but fearless. And I think there's a very big difference, or reckless. It's not reckless either, but fearless. So look, it's a cool spot to be in. And I know it's not perfect, and I know it's not for everyone, but and the things that I committed to early on, I did. You know, I have 5 great kids. I have a beautiful wife. We live a really comfortable life. And I still ride my bike. I still like to have fun. I still travel. So it sounds a little hokey, but a lot of my peers didn't manage this, because a lot of my peers went through the same stuff. And some of it very, very well documented, and some of them not alive anymore. So when I look at them, certainly the ones who are no longer with us, and I look at the ones that are just a mess, and then I look at me, and it sounds corny, but I'm like, damn, dude, I'm kind of proud of you. Like, and I think we should all allow ourselves a space. That's not an arrogant, just allow ourselves a place and space to be proud of ourselves.
Yeah, I really like that. I feel like no one I know does that, because we're all overworked and we're just trying to get to the next, point. So I was talking a little bit earlier again about some of the companies in Next Ventures portfolio. I mean, obviously there's the wellness companies. There's Oura Ring, but there's also the less obvious kind of wellness bets, like as I mentioned, SteadyMD. I mean, what in your mind unites those things? Like, there's Nike in there, you know. I mean, how do you think it? Like, what's your kind of thesis overall?
So it's really, and again, big kudos and credit to the team for. Because early days we did do PowerDot, and we did do Hammerhead, and we did Aura. Aura's obviously been a great success for us, but we've really broadened the thesis of this fund, and really if you just think of whole person care, whether it's downstream or upstream, and probably we'll get away from some of the areas that we invested in early on. But if it's a wearable like Aura, or if you go downstream and it's something like SteadyMD or Juno Medical or Trial Library or Vital Bio or Terra, it almost looks like 2 different portfolios. And so, but let's use SteadyMD as an example. Again, a lot of times you have to do a ton of diligence when it comes to investing, as we all know. But we invested in SteadyMD, a telehealth play, prior to COVID, back when we invested, people were like, wait, you're going to look at your doctor on your iPhone? And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden people were like, why would I go to the doctor's office? I mean, COVID was for a few of our portfolio companies, COVID was a real blessing. It was as terrible as it was. I mean, look what it did for Oura Ring. Look what it did for SteadyMD. Look what and look what it did for what we are all doing, right? To me, and I talk about this a lot, like COVID was this moment where like, wait, so we're not going to live forever? We better get ourselves in check. It was this reminder of our frailty that I think was, frankly, as terrible as it was on all levels, there was a part of it where you're like, all right, we better get serious.
Yeah, you mentioned frailty. You mentioned whole person care. We talked a little bit, last time we chatted about the importance of behavioral health and mental health, and I think one of the companies in your portfolio focuses on that too. How do you, and I think this is a topic of conversation that's come up throughout this conference, is mental health is not a siloed thing. It's a component of whole person care, as you put it. I mean, how do you think about integrating mental health into your own regimen, and how do you think, entrepreneurs and founders should be thinking about it?
Well, I'm a big believer, before we get into the answer, I'm a big believer in rebranding things. So just like we're in Las Vegas, which, by the way, we're at this big health conference in Las Vegas. I was like, what? What? It's in Vegas? The least healthiest place in the world. But I'm a big believer in rebranding. So Las Vegas, it used to be called gambling. So they rebranded it. It's called gaming. The oil industry, they didn't like that anymore, so they rebranded it. The energy sector. The liquor business wanted to rebrand it, and it's now the spirits business. Marijuana rebranded, it's now cannabis. So I'm a big proponent of mental health. I think needs to rebrand itself as mental fitness. It's just, and I'm super proud of society for helping erase this, not that it's totally erased, but as we slowly but surely peel back the layers and erase the stigma around people having mental health issues, going to therapy. I mean, we'd be here all day if I told you all the therapy sessions I went through in the last 10 years.
Same.
Yeah, and so but but I also, like I told you a minute ago, I just kind of don't care, so I like talking about this stuff. I'm sort of proud of that. But I think and eventually this stigma will be totally gone. And COVID, another thing that really amplified and exaggerated and illuminated the crisis that we have, especially with our young people. I mean, I have 5 kids, everywhere from 12 years old to 23. And we can, if anybody that watched Social Dilemma, you know what our kids are growing into, and it's absolutely terrifying. And I don't think it's going to get a lot better, which is a really morbid thing to say, but yeah, it's super important. That's why we did Mood Health.
So your venture firm is called Next. What's next for you?
Well, not immediately, right?
Could be immediately. Maybe not in the next 5 to 10 minutes.
In terms of the fund, we probably have, because we have we have the reserves for follow-on, we probably have 2 to 4 more deals we'll do out of Fund 1, and then we'll go out and potentially raise another fund. And I'll continue to do my shows, which I spend about 10% of my time on the shows and about 90% of my time on the fund. And so, yeah, we'll just keep cranking. I'd like to be in better shape. I'd like to lose 10 pounds.
Is there any, we talked earlier about getting deal flow through the podcast. Are you still getting deal flow through the podcast? How's that going?
We are, but as we've moved, away from those consumer-facing deals, it makes less sense. Not that it makes no sense, but it just starts to make less sense. It still brings deal flow because the audience is still there and keeps, our name and our brand out there in the public eye. But I think, let me just say one thing about this team and our approach. We're super hands-on with every company. Very, very involved. We also, everybody in this room knows, it's a competitive business. The name of the game is deal flow. The name of the game right after that is winning the deal. The one thing I like to tell people is we have a very basic approach. If we've done the diligence, we like the deal, we want to invest, it's a competitive market, we ask, founder X, hey, speak to 3 or 4 of our existing founders and come back to us. And I'm never shocked, and I'm always so proud of the answer once they have talked to, what does next do for you, right? Does Lance do anything? He's got all these smart people around him. Does this guy even do anything? I don't know the answer to that, but it's once that process is finished, then typically we get the deal.
What are some of the core elements of your due diligence process? I mean, obviously, we talk about due diligence a lot. I feel like I do it as a reporter. All the investors here hopefully are doing it. Is there any secret sauce that you have? Any core questions that you feel like you can't not ask? Those sorts of things?
No, look, I think any investment starts with the people. There's a legendary VC out of Boulder, a guy named Brad Feld. And I went to one of his talks one time, and he said, and he's with the Foundry Group in Boulder, and he says, we have 4 criteria before we invest. Number 1, the people. Number 2, the people. Number 3, the people. Number 4, the idea. And it changed my whole, I got the people thing and the idea, but to hear the emphasis said like that from such a successful guy, it really does start with the people. And then once we dig into the diligence part, the reality is I can't hold a candle to Julian Eisen or Jordan or Mel. Now, I know everybody in the space. Once we are in the deal and we have to make these connections happen, I can do that. But, I mean, these guys run circles around me.
So obviously the majority of my questions so far are focused on venture. But I wanted to save some space, and it looks like we have 3 minutes left. I wanted to talk about your care journey too. I mean, we're at a healthcare conference. As I said, cancer at 25, stage 3. What were the components of that care journey that really stood out to you? What do you wish had been different? I mean, all these people here are in this industry, and I'm sure could use any sort of advice from somebody who's experienced it firsthand.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been 26 years. And I tell, when I deal with other cancer patients or young men that have a diagnosis of testicular cancer, I say, look, bad news, you got cancer. Good news, you have a very curable form. Now, mine had advanced to this almost ridiculous stage, but I worked very hard. And when I was diagnosed, I was living in Austin, Texas, which of course now the world views as like the coolest, smartest city in America, or a lot of people do. But back then we didn't have a medical school. We didn't have a specific cancer hospital. We had just sort of 7-Eleven depots of oncology. Like, go down there, fill up your car, And I said, look, I don't know very much, but this doesn't feel right. So I'm going to start to move around. So I went to Houston, talked to MD Anderson, and then I eventually ended up in Indiana and met the legend, Dr. Larry Einhorn. But I knew that I wasn't stopping until I was finally in the place that A, I thought would cure me, but more importantly, B, if I wasn't going to be cured and I wasn't going to live, I would have known that that was my best shot. And I think the most special thing about being in Indiana, and obviously Dr. Einhorn essentially created the cure for testicular cancer, was I leaned into a nurse. Her name was Latrice Haney. And I immediately saw her as this beautiful lady, and I said, we're gonna be buddies. And I wanted her to invest in me as a friend because I thought that would help me. And so, but Latrice and I were inseparable. But she was my guardian angel in a really, really weird place, a place I'd never been, a place I didn't think I would ever be. I was confused. It was the big words, bad numbers, and I just identified her. And I think this really, to answer your question, is having. I mean, doctors are amazing, right? But nurses really changed the game, in my opinion. So, without Latrice, I don't know. Yeah, she was really special.
So it's about, I mean, obviously, not a surprising answer, but it's about the human connection. And we're obviously at a conference that combines tech with health. But I think at the end of the day, everyone here wants to use tech to enhance that very human connection. So it's a great note to end on. We're just out of time, so I feel like we timed it quite well. Thank you for that.
You did
Appreciate
great.
it. Thank you all so much for joining us. I really, really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. And I think we're probably all that's standing between all of you and your first drink, maybe second drink of the night. So we'll let you go, but thank you again.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lance and Aaron.